Hello and welcome back to the Rabbit Hole Podcast, the podcast where we deep dive into some of the wildest, strangest, and craziest conspiracy theories out there. Today, we'll be talking with someone very special to me, my dad, Jon Julius, and we will be chatting about Big Pharma versus Big Laya. For reference, this conspiracy is basically based in the United States, but it is also outside of the United States. It's the idea that the pharmaceutical companies, food industry, FDA, and even the EMA are responsible for creating and withholding the medications that would actually help people, and the fact that medications and vaccines are created for profit, and the entire pharmaceutical industry is not to help people at the end of the day, it's to create a profit off of people's health. So, to give a little bit of a backstory, I want you to think about something. Imagine that you have been going on for about 5 to 10 years of just continually getting sick. You're sick 3, 4, 5 times a quarter, and you go to the doctor and you get the medication, the antibiotics that they prescribe you, you get the vaccines that you're supposed to have, you get everything that they say that you're supposed to do, and you still end up getting sick. You go a couple weeks, you get sick again. Go a couple more weeks, you get sick again. It's really, really tiring. And so that was my dad. My dad would go time in and time again and continue to get sick. He would go to the doctor, do everything that the doctor was telling him to do, take the antibiotics, drink lots of water, do the probiotics, that kind of thing. And he would continue to get sick time and time again until he switched over to Dr. Buston and Dr. Villarreal at Embracing Health. So they took a little bit more of a deep dive into understanding why my dad was getting sick. They did blood work and they understood and made him think and understand that maybe you should take a look at your lifestyle. Lifestyle is meaning what you eat, what you drink, how you live your life, the amount of exercise that you get, whether you are spiritual in some aspects, it can be linked to that, how your energy is distributed, your mental health, all of those things. Because at the end of the day, that comes down to affecting your health. And so he took a deep breath and did a deep dive. And for the past 15 years, my dad has been completely away from prescription medication. He has been completely away from vaccines, and he has been the healthiest that he has ever been in his 50s. And this is all from how he changed what he was doing with his life and changed from eating and taking the medication that they were giving him and the antibiotics and healing himself naturally when he gets sick, and also doing preventative measures to make sure that he didn't get sick. Now, for this reference, this is all a long story to come up to saying that my dad has a lot of information when it comes to talking about Big Pharma, and he has done a lot of research over the last few years. If you go onto our channel on YouTube, or if you go on Spotify, you will see that the uncut interview with my dad is on there as well, so you can hear from him firsthand what he thought about the conspiracy, along with Big Pharma, more like Big Laya. And at the end of the day, my dad took his own health into his own hands and away from Big Pharma because they weren't helping him, and he truly believes that Big Pharma is genuinely out for profit, and so are its constituents like the FDA, EMA, and the food industry in America. Now, after doing the interview with my dad, you'll hear a lot from his side. I wanted to give you my side and a little bit of research that I had done following talking to him, and I'm about to go into more depth of personal experiences and beliefs of my own. So I asked my dad about 8 questions, and you can see all of those in the podcast if you go and listen to it. I'll also have it linked down below. Going off of those 8 questions, I will go through and tell you my side of the story and what I believe from personal experience and research that I have done. So the first thing that we really talked about was suppressing cures for profit. Now, Big Pharma, the idea is Big Pharma hides or suppresses cures to keep patients reliant on long-term treatments. The fact behind this is developing drugs is expensive. It's an average of $2.6 billion in 10 years. Companies profit from treatments, but no evidence exists that they're suppressing cures, to say. Regulatory agencies like the FDA and EMA and others require transparency in clinical trials. My beliefs are very similar from my dad's, and I don't think that they're necessarily suppressing a cure, but they're not taking into account the root problem. And the medication that they're giving us is basically just a band-aid to put on at the end of the day. It's just suppressing the symptoms, putting a band-aid on the symptoms, and it's not treating the root cause of what is the true issue that's creating that illness or creating that disease to flare up the way that it is. The true cure for most things is a natural lifestyle, and that takes a lot of change, and it does prevent and help illnesses. Moving forward, the next thing I talked to my dad about was drug prices are inflated intentionally to maximize profits. The thing that I found is that the US has some of the largest and highest drug prices in the world. You can see this clip right here. And an example of this is insulin. Costs for insulin are 10 times more in the United States than they are abroad. Pricing often reflects patents and market exclusivity and lack of regulation rather than deliberate collusion. Now, this pop-up that I have on the screen right now is from the American Hospital Association, and I'll link this down below as well. But it says number 4, and there's about 10 of them, I believe, 8 of them, sorry, there's about 8 of them. And the 2 that I picked out were the myth says high prices are necessary to fund development of new drugs. The fact behind this is 8 out of 10 major drug manufacturers spend more on advertising than on research and development. They spend more on advertising than research and development. I don't see how this isn't for profit. If you needed that much money in order to advertise rather than develop and research the drug, there's an issue. You need to understand that this isn't, in my opinion, that this is entirely for profit. The next thing that I wanted to show, which is also on that little clip that I put up there and is also linked below, is that the myth says high drug prices reflect the value of the drug. If a drug cures a condition, it will allow patients to avoid the costs of future treatment. The fact is many high-cost drugs help individuals manage chronic conditions and are not cures. Manage chronic conditions, but are not cures. That's just saying it's not fixing the problem. It's putting a band-aid on the problem. The root cause of the problem is your lifestyle and the way that you're choosing to live your life, whether that's to be with the amount of exercise that you get, and exercising can be walking, or it's the food that we're putting in our bodies. But just moving forward, we talked about natural medicine suppression by the medical industry, and a little bit more research that I found on this is remedies like this without profit potential are less likely to be researched, because a huge issue within natural medicine alternatives is that doctors typically and the medical industry typically look down on them because there's a lack of scientific evidence of effectiveness, because there's no established safety protocols and can cause potential risks such as dangerous interactions with prescription medication or severe side effects. Now, this lack of scientific evidence is purely because, let's think about this. It's hard to test. Everyone's body is going to be different. My body and what I put into my body is completely different from what my dad puts into his body. We have different conditions. He has certain things that he has wrong with him, and I have certain things that I have wrong with me, and therefore I have to eat and consume things differently than he does. Makes sense, right? So that part of the argument I understand. I understand that it is harder and it is necessarily inconclusive when you're doing research on that. But at the end of the day, you have to think about it in the aspect of turmeric. Turmeric is a natural anti-inflammatory. It can be taken every day and it's enhanced by black pepper. You can buy them in capsules from the vitamin shop, whatever. And you can also put it in your food. Now, it's hard for the medical industry to get a patent on that because it's a naturally occurring thing, which is why the vitamin industry has boomed. But you have to be so incredibly careful when you're looking at the vitamin industry because not everything is taken care of the right way. Like certain things could have bases in them that aren't necessarily good for you, just additives to make it easier to consume or to make it easier for the company to sell them. And at the same time, it can interact with prescription medication and have severe side effects. But if the medical industry looked at medications like that and took them more seriously and used them in a more holistic approach, in a more well balanced approach to finding the root cause of issues, then that could be mitigated because your doctor knows what you're taking. You tell them what you're taking, then you tell them what supplements you're taking, and they tell you, no, those aren't good to take together, or you ask them, hey, can I take this supplement? Yeah, you can. Or they prescribe you a supplement. I say prescribe, I should retract that. They recommend the supplement for you. And so they know what they're putting in your body. Another reason why more natural medication and natural supplements and natural alternatives have such regulatory hurdles is really because insufficient funding. Research into natural medicines receives a disproportionately small amount of government funding compared to the conventional medicine that we are used to today. And it makes sense. You don't have the money, you can't research. But again, why do we not have the money? It's because, in my opinion, much like what my dad said, the reason why there is insufficient funding for more natural approaches is honestly because, think about it, the government is pumping money, and government agencies are pumping money into prescription medication research and vaccine research. Then those vaccines and those prescriptions are made. They're sold at an astonishing price, making those CEOs money. Then you get sick because it's only treating the bare bone minimum and it's suppressing those symptoms and it's not ever really addressing the root cause. If we would address the root cause, then you would not continue to get sick. But because you continue to get sick, you continue to go back and you get more medication and you get more doctor's appointments and it just repeats and repeats and repeats and rinses and then repeats again. And this makes them money. It's also an issue with wealth distribution. Wealth distribution has a major effect on who can get said natural products. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm a broke college kid. My parents helped me out a lot with some of the stuff that I have to take for what I'm dealing with. And your insurance doesn't cover that kind of stuff. The supplements, the powders, all of that kind of stuff, the healthy eating, making sure you're eating organic, all of those things add up. And those who are less fortunate, those who live in certain areas or in certain demographics, can't afford those kinds of things. So this then causes wealthier patients to be able to have more access to these natural alternatives than those who are on Medicare, who have to go ahead and access the medication and medical resources that they have available to them because that's all they can afford. That's all that's government issued to them. Again, makes you think all comes back to the government. The government's taking care of those people, and they're putting a band-aid on their illnesses, but then they continue to come back and get sick. So then the cycle repeats again. One person that I would genuinely recommend looking into is Dr. Josh Axe. Dr. Axe earned a doctorate in chiropractic from Palmer College and a Master's of Science in Organizational Leadership from Johns Hopkins University. He is also a certified clinical nutritionist and doctor of natural medicine. He has founded one of the largest functional medical clinics in the US, which is located in Nashville, Tennessee, where he's treated clients and professional athletes as well. I'll link his website down below. But his story is all rooted in two personal health crises, and those being his mother's cancer diagnosis. So she was initially diagnosed with cancer when she was about 40. She ended up finding out that she had breast cancer, unfortunately, and she underwent the conventional treatments, including a mastectomy and chemotherapy, which caused her significant continuing suffering. The next thing that happened was several years later, her cancer had unfortunately returned. And instead of pursuing a more conventional treatment, Dr. Axe helped her and she decided to use natural remedies. This included a diet enriched vegetables and berries, supplemented with mushrooms, and this approach combined with prayer led to a full recovery. The inspiration that he got from watching his mother heal from a severe illness using a natural approach rather than a conventional approach deeply influenced him and sparked his passion for alternative medicine. Then, about 2 years ago, Dr. Axe suffered a back injury, which led him to get a stem cell injection. The treatment resulted in several spinal infections that spread to his bones and spinal canal. He was left bedridden, and doctors warned that he would never be able to walk again. He combined conventional antibiotic treatments with natural remedies, including hyperbaric oxygen therapy and targeted supplementation. After being unable to walk for nearly a year, he made a full recovery, and he credits his determination, faith, and mindset as a critical factor in his healing. Now, if this isn't the best example of how you can merge the two, conventional medicine and a holistic approach to finding the root cause, I don't know what is. I would highly recommend going and looking at his page. He has a lot on YouTube, he has a lot on Instagram, Facebook, and I will go ahead and link his website below. So I would definitely take a look at that if I were you. Moving forward, I asked my dad, are vaccines a profit-driven scheme? This idea was exacerbated really by COVID-19 vaccine, where companies like Pfizer made tens of millions of dollars in profit. But I still don't believe that vaccines are for profit, but I don't believe that they're to help as well. And this is just based off of my personal experiences. I personally have not gotten a flu shot in so long I can't remember, and I have seriously only gotten the flu one time in that entire time period. And to go on top of that, I went in because I was coming into college and I thought that we still had to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So, against my father's best intentions, I went and got the first vaccine. I was bedridden sick for days. And mindful, this was in 2022. COVID happened in 2020. I had never gotten COVID before then. I'd never had it. I had friends who had had it, and I'd been around them, I'd been exposed, and I had never gotten COVID. As soon as I got the vaccine, not even 3 months later, I got COVID and have seriously gotten COVID every year since. And that is just my personal experience and is what backs my personal belief of I don't believe in vaccines necessarily. I make sure to do a lot of research, and at the end of the day, I'm putting myself at risk because when I am sick and I am contagious, I do separate myself and self isolate and make sure that I don't get others sick. But at the end of the day, I don't want to put those things into my body. The next thing that I asked my dad about is, do pharmaceutical companies create diseases to sell treatments? Now, if you go back and watch what my dad said, I completely agree with him. I don't think that it's necessarily that they create diseases, but I do think that the food that we eat does. When you go to the grocery store and you look at a pack of cereal for your kids or for yourself or for your family, and you can't read the first 7 ingredients, there's an issue. The food that we eat should be whole foods. The whole foods should be able to be read, and it should be organic and free range when it comes to meat and when it comes to eggs. And things should be made naturally, not highly processed with corn syrups and food dyes and all of these different things. And honestly, I'm 100% on board with my dad, and I genuinely think that it is not necessarily that pharmaceutical companies or the medical industry creates diseases, but therefore the FDA is in partnership with the food that is released and allowed for production and allowed for sale within the United States. And that is why we get sick, because we are nutritionally deficient, vitamin deficient, and it's all from our food. We are not getting what we need to get from our food because our food is highly processed and has insane ingredients that honestly, half the time, I don't even know what is in them. Moving forward, I kind of just touched on this, but I asked my dad, is the FDA too close to the pharmaceutical industry? And honestly, in my opinion, I genuinely think that it is. And when you do a little bit of research into it, it makes you see more that yes, it is a little bit too close for comfort, and it's also a little bit alarming. Some sources of conflict that are very prevalent that people like to touch on are funding, and one act is the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. It allows the FDA to collect user fees from drug and device companies to fund the review process. Critiques contend this financial dependency creates a perception that the FDA becomes aligned with rather than independent of the industries it regulates. The next critique that a lot of people have over the FDA is the revolving door phenomenon. There is a well-documented pattern of FDA reviewers leaving their government positions to take lucrative jobs with the pharmaceutical companies they previously oversaw. This movement raises questions about impartiality and allows for potential behind-the-scenes influence. I don't think I have anything else to say with that. The next thing is industry-provided data. The drug approval process relies heavily on the data and information provided by the pharmaceutical companies themselves, introducing inherent bias into the data generation and reporting process, which the FDA must then critically evaluate. Honestly, I don't think that there's much more to say than those 3 points, and there is a lot more that I could go into with that, but it just makes you think at the end of the day. And for me, my opinion, the FDA is way too close to pharmaceutical industries, and they know exactly what they're doing for profit. At the end of the day, money makes the world go round. How you get it is what matters. The last thing that I talked to my dad about is why you think the US is so much worse in some aspects than the rest of the world when it comes to health. Now, for a little bit of reference, I studied abroad about a year and a half ago, in Italy. I am gluten intolerant and dairy intolerant due to some other issues that I have. And when I went to Italy, I was perfectly fine. I could eat gluten, I could eat dairy, I could eat a lot of things that I could not eat here in the United States because it would make me very sick. And that made me kind of ask this question and want to do a little bit further research into this. And some of what I had found is in the United States, according to the CDC, and now this was back in 2023, 42% of United States Americans are obese. Over 60% of daily calories come from processed foods. 1 in 4 adults meet the recommended exercise guidelines. And about 14.5 million Americans suffer from alcohol use disorder. Opioid overdoses kill about 80,000 Americans per year. Let those numbers sink in. 42% of US adults are obese, and 60% of daily calories come from processed foods. And we wonder why people are sick. To go on top of that, the average American takes about 4 prescription drugs daily. 1 in 5 adults struggle with mental illness, and the life expectancy in the United States has fallen to 76%, lower than most developed nations despite spending the most on healthcare. In closing, I ask you to ask yourself this question. Why do major companies and medical industries not invest in education of holistic and natural medicine? Why does the medical industry not overarching look into the root cause of people's illnesses, not just put a band-aid on it? The answer is there's no profit for them. At the end of the day, this hurts the little people. It makes major corporations millions upon millions of dollars from profiting from our sickness and uneducation. My challenge for you is to do more research. Maybe start with Dr. Axe. Maybe start with looking into more alternative options for your food. Looking at the back of the cereal box when you go to the grocery store. Maybe picking the one that you really can read the first 5 ingredients of. I'll leave you with that, and I hope that you genuinely think about this. Looking at next week, we'll be introducing Dr. Katrina Marks and talking about Area 51 and alien secrets. Make sure if you like this video and you like this content that you leave a like, subscribe so you can hear more every week. You can listen to this on Spotify if you are on YouTube, and if you are on Spotify, you can watch the video podcast on YouTube. Keep up to date on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. The handles and reference links to everything will be in the bio, and I look forward to going on a deep dive with you again next week.